The Pest and Predator podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes, powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can benefit your farm. Welcome to the Pest and Predator podcast, brought to you by Field Heroes, powered by Western Grains Research Foundation. Visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can benefit your farm. Today's guest on the Pest and Predator podcast is Tyler Wist with AAFC in Saskatoon. Hey Tyler, how's it going?
Hey, going well. Sean, how are you doing today?
Good. How long have you been with Ag Canada?
So I've been off and on with Ag Canada, but I started as a research scientist in January 2016. Before that, I postdoced there, and I was in there a bit as a student as well.
And so what is your area of focus?
So my official title is Research Scientist, Field Crop Entomologist. So what that means is I work on insects that you'll find in your fields. So I've been working on things that attack your crops and then the things that attack those insects that are attacking your crops.
Do we sometimes not give the latter enough attention?
Yeah, definitely. So that's like your unseen army in your field, those beneficial insects that are there attacking those pest insects. And so we've got a campaign that we call the Field Heroes campaign. It's powered by WGRF, Western Grains Research Foundation. And so the at Field Heroes, you can find them on Twitter, you can find them online. You want to follow those guys if you want to know about the beneficial insects in your field. And so it's kind of our way of promoting these beneficial insects and really making you think about them before you go and spray, for example.
Well, we're going to talk about parasitoids. How do you say that again?
All right, so we're going to talk about parasitoids, Sean.
See, the parasitoids. There you go. Okay, it's hard to get it out. Okay, so what are some of the visual cues you need to be paying attention to?
Well, first, let's enlighten everybody as to what a parasitoid is. So, a parasitoid is a specialized kind of predator. So this is a predator that has the offspring that winds up killing the pest insect. So what I mean is the mother parasitoid goes out and finds a host, and she either lays an egg in or on that pest insect, and it's her offspring that winds up killing that pest insect. And so you might look at the word and say, oh, that kind of looks like parasitic. And so in a way they are parasitic, but they kill their host. And a good parasite doesn't kill its host, but a good parasitoid does kill its host.
Okay, so talk about the aphid version.
So we've got a few aphid species out there, and they leave behind in the field kind of remnants of their parasitism that we call aphid mummies. So you're looking through your field, you're counting aphids, and you see these things that look like aphids, but they're sort of swollen and they're brown and they don't move when you poke them. So what you're looking at there is an aphid mummy. So let me tell you how that mummy forms. So we get a Phidious Wasp is one of the genus that comes along. So she flies along, she uses her antennae, and she taps the back of the aphid, and that gives her some chemical cues that says, hey, I've got an aphid in front of me. Then she fires out her ovipositor. That's what she uses to lay eggs. And she stings those aphids. She lays one egg inside the aphid. That egg develops, and within about 8 to 10 days, you get what is an aphid mummy. And so the larva of that parasitic wasp basically eats the aphid from the inside out, and then when it's ready to pupate and become its own adult wasp, that's when the aphid mummy happens. And so you'll find these kind of brown things stuck to your plants, and if it's got a little trap door on the back end of it, it means you've missed the emergence of that parasitic wasp, that parasitoid. But if there's no little trap door on the back, and that's where the parasitoid cuts its way out with its mandibles, if you don't see that trap door, you're in that sort of 5 to 6 day window where the parasitoid is still inside that aphid mummy.
Is there areas of Western Canada where this would be more prolific, or certain crop types?
All right, so if you've got aphids in your crop, you probably have a parasitoid as well. So we don't typically talk about aphids in canola, but if you're growing canola in a greenhouse, you always get the green peach aphid. You can actually buy these parasitoids and release them into your greenhouse to try to control the aphids. It's sort of like a magic bullet for aphids. They just seek them out. Now, if you're in a wheat field or any kind of a cereal field, you'll have 2 different species of aphid. And around here, what I've been finding is we have mostly just one species of parasitic wasp that will go after those cereal aphids. And if you're in a pea field, we've got a very similar type of wasp that will go after your pea aphids. So we got lentils, fava beans, and peas that I've been looking at. And there are a couple of other parasitoids. So they're in a different genus, and they make a slightly different mummy. And I was really excited when I found those in the first year of the project. And so, so in that case, the parasitic wasp larva doesn't stay inside the mummy. It actually crawls out from underneath the mummy, and it pupates under there. So you get this dead, empty aphid skin with kind of a cocoon underneath it. It's very cool.
What about Cotesia?
So, say you're in a wheat field or a barley field, and you've got this bunch of white things that look like eggs, but they're way too big to be insect eggs, and they're hanging out on the awns of your plant or sitting on the head of your plant. So what you've got there is you've got the remains of a wheathead armyworm. So we've got a parasitic wasp called Cotesia, and Cotesia is super cool because it lays one egg, and then that egg divides inside the body of the caterpillar. And when it divides, it can divide anywhere from 10 to 200 times, depending on the Cotesia species. And so then all at once, out of the body of the caterpillar come these, well, they look like little caterpillars, but they're the wasp larvae, and they chew their way out through the cuticle of the caterpillar. So I've got videos, I've got pictures of 30 to 40 of these coming out of a wheathead armyworm. And then right away, they spin a communal cocoon. So you'll see them moving their heads back and forth like a little weaving loom, and they make this kind of a puffball. And if you look at it, inside the puffball are these little whitish cocoons, and that's what often gets misconstrued as eggs. So when I see that on social media or someone sends me a picture of it, I get excited and I say, hey, can you please send me that? And so, we're just looking at this. And so wheathead armyworm is never really a big problem in your field because these Cotesia just take care of them.
That is absolutely, it's amazing to hear that kind of, to have that kind of activity in the field. A lot of growers would probably not be aware that this kind of stuff is even happening.
Yeah, they definitely aren't. And so that's why we're trying to promote this with Field Heroes. So Cotesia will go after, Cotesia is a genus. There's lots of species in there. And so some of them will go after, say, Bertha armyworm and cutworms. And they're out there. They're doing this to all these caterpillars. And they're often responsible for the big population crashes that we see in the insect world.
Are there any parasitoids in wheat midge?
So wheat midge parasitoids, they don't really leave anything behind. So if you want to find a wheat midge parasitoid, you need to figure out when your wheat midge adults are starting to emerge. Then you look for Macroglenis penetrans, that's the wheat midge parasitoid, and you can catch them with a sweep net. They like to come out during the daytime, about 4 to 5 days after your wheat midge adults have come out. Why do they do that? Because they want to lay their eggs into the wheat midge eggs. So they need to let those wheat midge lay their eggs first. And so what you're going to find is if you go out with a sweep net, you can actually catch them with your sweep net just by sweeping at the head level in your crops. And you'll get these little black specks crawling around. And if you've got your jeweler's loupe or if you've got a magnifying glass and you get a close-up look at them, you can actually see the males have these rust red colored eyes. It's very cool. And you say, hey, I've got Macroglenis in my field. Now, don't forget that last year's wheat field is probably this year's canola field. And so those parasitoids are going to be emerging in the canola field. And like any old good wasp, they want to be drinking nectar. So they could be nectaring on your canola flowers. So it's another reason not to spray your canola when it's at flower with insecticides.
How do I, with all of these different examples you've given, how do we enhance the population? Because clearly they're doing good things. Is there things that we can do in our fields to enhance the population of these parasitoids?
So enhancing the population of parasitoids, that is a good question. So we want to try not to kill them. with broad-spectrum insecticides. If you do think that you have an issue, make sure your economic threshold for the pests. Don't spray unless you have to. And if you do use something that's softer on those beneficial insects, ask your agronomist if they can identify those beneficial insects in the field for you as well, and see if there's if there's something that they can be doing. Now, encouraging these. So, like I said, a lot of them are wasps. Some of them are flies. They need a food source. So if you've got a really unproductive section of your field, it just doesn't produce at all. It's that field corner, or maybe it's around a slough edge, and nothing really happens there. Maybe you want to seed it to some kind of a flowering plant, like wildflowers, to give food to these insects. So that is providing alternate habitats for those parasitoids so they can build up and then come into your field.
You mentioned the timing of insecticide. That is absolutely critical in terms of maintaining the populations of these parasitoids.
Yeah, definitely timing is critical. So know what's in your field before you get out there and spray. From Ag Canada, we put together it's for cereal aphids, but it's got pictures of the parasitoids in there. It's got pictures of the mummies, and we call it the Cereal Aphid Manager app, and it will help you, at least in your cereal crops, to understand the beneficial insects that are in there, because when you're scouting for aphids, we're also getting you to scout for the beneficial insects that are in the field. And there's a little black box with an equation that's working in the background, and it actually takes into account the action of those parasitoids and beneficial insects in the field on the population buildup of those aphids. So it's a good learning tool for you if you're out in the field, and it's also a good tool for recording the number of aphids that you have today, and then next week when you come back to keep scouting, it keeps track of all of that. So it's one of those free products that you can find in the Apple Store or the Google Play Store.
So it's not just taking into account the threshold of the pests we're trying to eliminate, but it's also taking a look at the populations of the pest or the insects we're trying to keep in the field, because they're working for us.
Yeah, that's right, Shaun. So we take what's called an economic threshold, which doesn't take into account these beneficial insects. We turn it into a dynamic action threshold. So your typical action threshold is, I need to spray to keep it from getting to the economic threshold. So we take that action threshold and make it dynamic by adding these beneficial insects into it. So that means it changes a little bit. So your action threshold can change. So if you're in a field and you have tons of lady beetles, there's a good chance that they will keep your aphid population under control, because that's what they're there looking for.
Hey, great stuff, Tyler. Thanks a lot.
Hey, it's been great talking to you, Shaun.
The Pest and Predator podcast is brought to you by Field Heroes, powered by the Western Grains Research Foundation. Visit fieldheroes.ca to learn how beneficial insects can benefit your farm.